Greetings folks, and welcome to another orchestraltemplates.com gear overview. I hope you're doing absolutely fantastic. I'm Tobias from orchestraltemplates.com, where you'll find custom template solutions for working composers. The quest for the perfect MIDI controller setup seems eternal. Everyone has different ideas about what makes a setup great. There's touch interfaces, only one keyboard controllers, and all sorts of standalone devices. Today I want to talk about a setup I have grown to like, namely the combination of the Korg nanoKEY and nanoPAD controllers. As usual, here's the full disclosure. I do not work for or am in any relationship with any of the mentioned companies. The devices shown here I've bought in retail. I have not received anything for free. None of the companies here pay any money to me and there is no affiliation at all. With that legal stuff out of the way, let's get going. The Korg nanoKEY and nanoPAD are small USB-powered MIDI controllers made by the Japanese music instrument company Korg. The nanoKEY is a small keyboard, while the nanoPAD is a pad controller with an added XY pad. There's also nanoControl with faders and rotary encoders, but you won't deal with that one here. There are two different generations of each one out there. I actually use a mix between both generations. Also, there are multiple color schemes, with the newest one being an orange-green as well as blue-yellow, the latter probably sponsored by a large Swedish furniture store. What they all have in common is that they are small, affordable, and generally very well built. They also happen to be tactile. I do not like touch interfaces. While I take cover from the rotten eggs and tomatoes flying my way, let me clarify. I do not like touch interfaces for specific things, namely things I need to do all the time blind. I use a touchscreen interface for a lot of things, actually one of my own invention, and there is bound to be a video about that someday in the future. But for basic workflow features, nothing for me beats the combination of those two Korg devices. Let me show you what they do. First of all, something general. Most of the nifty stuff you see people's workflow interfaces do is actually rooted in some sort of macro or script language, often aided by their sequencer's capability to support such workflow enhancing interfaces. I use Cubase and Nuendo, and their tools for making these things work is the generic remote. The generic remote receives incoming MIDI information and will trigger macros, key commands, and all kinds of functions based on that. The true power is this generic remote, plus any custom macros or scripts behind it. So theoretically, all these fancy things can be triggered by any MIDI controller. Even your old keyboard from days of yore when you were a kid, as long as it can output MIDI somehow. I'll go through some of the commands and macros I have my Korg devices trigger just as examples. Keep in mind that you can do this with any MIDI controller. In this video, I want to show you both some of the things you can do this way, as well as why I think the Korg devices are perfect for that kind of stuff. Let's start with the nanoPAD. I use two of these, an older one with 12 pads and a newer one with 16 pads. They both let you switch between 4 layouts on the fly, which means you have quite a lot of buttons at your disposal. All the nanoSERIES controllers are programmed by the Korg control editor, which runs directly on your machine. I like this a lot because it means I can create all the mappings with ease on my PC and do not have to deal with awkward hardware assignments or touchscreen shenanigans. Going from left to right, the XY pad are mainly used to morph between articulations or to influence synth parameters. In the main layout, this parameter is set to CC22 and 23, which controls the Y and X axis in Orchestra Tools multi-articulation patches to morph between vibrato layers, or from sustain to tremolo or similar. Similar assignments have been made for other instruments, where the XY pad is just a great way to input MIDI CC data with these. Going to the pads, these trigger key switches and other features and patches. Consolino, on or off, soft release, niente, and other patch features are available with one press. I also switch legato on or off here, as well as trigger round-robin resets. Other layouts have similar commands for other instruments, depending on the features these patches have. The upper row of buttons serves to switch articulations. They are legato, polyphonic sustain, very short, short, marcato or similar, and one special articulation, like pizzicato for strings or flutter tongue for woodwinds. These are done by means of expression maps, switching between the individual MIDI channels where these articulations are loaded. In a nutshell, the nanoPads just send MIDI notes and CCs to the active track in Cubase, which triggers articulation changes or features inside the patches. Setting this up requires a bit of time, and I do my best to remap all CCs and key switches used by instruments to be consistent, but all this method does is make sure I can actually use the features provided by the developers. Often such features are not available in the UI directly, like for example the vibrato control and cinematic strings. You need to use a CC to control that. The nanoKEY is where things get a bit interesting. The nanoKEY is a small MIDI keyboard which I have placed next to the nanoPAD upside down, so the black keys are at the bottom. While the nanoPAD sends to the active track, the nanoKEY is set up as a generic remote in Cubase, not sending to any particular track. I use the nanoKEY to trigger a bunch of Cubase macros and key commands for often used workflow enhancements. Going from left to right, these are add octave below adds an octave below obviously, add octave above adds one octave above the selected note, or 2 octaves above the selected note. Select every second note selects every second note, obviously. With the length shorten or longer, I can make the length shorter or longer. Little steps. Of course, the steps are adjustable in the script. Position left and right. Shift the position of the notes a tiny bit just to really nail a bit of humanization in. Delete CCs deletes all the currently assigned CCs. In place opens the in place MIDI editor, which is really useful if you want to make quick and dirty changes. Similarly, bounce in place bounces the currently selected MIDI lane down to audio to do processing on it. Zoom track just zooms the current track in the Cubase arrange window. Mix down starts the mix down window in Cubase. Reverb switches my reverb on and off, and retrospective record records what's in the MIDI pattern buffer currently in Cubase, which is one of my all-time favorite Cubase features. So in the lower row, we have a bit of CC options. So if we go to volume, here we have a tiny bit of CC7. So just clicking CC -5 lowers everything by 5, +5, or +20. Then we have velocity down and velocity up, so let's switch to the velocity view. If nothing is selected, everything will apply to all the instruments. So when I do velocity down now, all the velocities will go down, all the velocities will go up. If I only select a number of events, it'll only do it to the selected ones. Then we have the very same for expression, so let's make sure we're in the expression lane here, have nothing selected. -5, +5, and +20. Last but not least, we have octave down and octave up, which is really useful if you have a line that you want to hear 1 octave higher or 1 octave lower. So you just select all the MIDI events you want transposed, say octave down, and down it goes. That's it. A lot of people have these on a touchscreen interface. I've actually toyed around with that a lot, but I have found that I do not need that many of those keys and that I prefer the tactile feedback of physical keys. So far this setup has been rock solid, requires no maintenance at all, and because the keys use their default pitch assignment, if I have to replace the keyboard or I want to use a generic remote somewhere else, I just need to get a new keyboard with no configuration at all required. It just works out of the box, so there's no downtime if anything breaks. So what makes these commands tick, and how can you implement this system for yourself? After you have connected a MIDI device, it will pop up in Cubase's device manager. If you want to use it with a generic remote, you want the MIDI signals to not get to the actual track you have selected. That is as easy as unchecking Include in all MIDI. Then you can create a new generic remote device. Generic remote devices are also listed here in the studio setup area, in the remote devices area. Here's my usual generic remote, which is assigned to the nanoKEY 3 keyboard. If we create a new one, plus generic remote, and we'll get a brand new empty generic remote. Usually what I do first is just delete all those entries here so we can start from scratch. So after deleting all those default values, we end up with a new and pristine generic remote device. First thing we want to do is assign the MIDI input. In that case, that would be my nanoKEY 3 keyboard, but it can of course be anything you want to use as the input for your generic remote. You generally do not need an output, you only do if you want to actually output something back to the device, for example if you're using a touchscreen. We leave that empty. The first thing I always do is just add one new item per button or fader or rotary encoder or whatever I want to control. So let's say we have 10 keys, for example, or 10 buttons. So let's add 10 of those. We already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Here we have 10 of them. Next thing is teaching the generic remote what you want to have as your input. You can do that either by just selecting that it's a note on or a controller or an aftertouch or whatever. But what you can also do is just press learn and wiggle the first fader or press the first button. So I'll do that. And you see it changes to note on or note off, MIDI channel 1, address 72. So that means it's MIDI note 72. Let's select the second one. Same thing with the second button. Third button, you can use the arrow keys. Okay, now we have all the assignments. We have our 10 buttons in this case, and we have the assignment what the MIDI device will be sending to Cubase on MIDI channel 1, MIDI note 72, and so on. The next step is naming all of those. You can enter the name up here, so for example CC7 plus 5, CC7 plus 20, and so on. Right now it doesn't appear here, but as soon as you click down there, it'll take it over. Then here in the lower part, you can assign what you want those commands to do. So in this case, for example, you go to Device, you select what you want to do. We want to execute a command. Here in the category, you get all the different categories Cubase offers you. Those are somewhat sorted, but it's best to just learn it by heart where you'll find something. So in that case, if you want the CC7+5 script, that's a Project Logical Editor preset. So let's go to Process Logical Preset. And then here we can choose the preset. In this case, CC7+5. You do the exact same thing with all the other ones. And when you're done, it basically looks like the generic mode I have set up here, where everything is neatly organized and you can control everything. There's actually almost no limit to the commands you can do. Just browse through all those different assignments. You can control the transport, you control the metronome. In the commands, you also get access to your visibility sets. If Cubase has a feature for it, you can remote control it from here. For actually creating all those presets like CC7+11 and so on, you need to use the logical editor. Once you have any MIDI event selected, you can just go to MIDI in the Cubase's menu and open the logical editor. It pops right up and gives you all your options here. So here, for example, is our CC7+5 preset. As you can see, type is a controller, equals number 7. And what it is to do is add 5 to the value. That's basically it. The logical editor allows you to do almost any transformation of MIDI stuff. And there's also a second one that applies to the whole project, not just one MIDI part, and that can be found in Project Logical Editor. It looks exactly the same, just gives you different presets. Again, let's just click on one of random. So here, for example, that one deletes all MIDI tracks. If you need something like that, you can also set it to delete all audio tracks or all time signature tracks, whatever you need. The generic remote can not only fire most of the usual shortcuts and commands in Cubase, you can even chain those together. This is done in the key commands window by using macros. You can create pretty much every combination of shortcuts, Project Logical Editor presets, or Logical Editor presets you want. One of my favorite ones I created is mute-unmute balancing events. If you've seen my template, I always have that little MIDI part at the beginning that sets some default values, CC1, CC7, 11, and so on. These little MIDI parts are great for balancing the template, but sadly, when playing back and also when showing and hiding folders, they are always played back by Cubase, so they really slow down the project a lot. One thing Cubase does is always chase MIDI events, so with those MIDI blips at the beginning, showing tracks or hiding them and playing back takes a while. Fortunately, you only need those MIDI balancing events once when loading the project to set the default values. So I have this little macro written to mute them so they're not in the way. Basically what it does is just have a chain of regular normal shortcut commands. I make sure nothing is selected, all tracks are unfolded, I go to the project start, I go one bar further so it moves beyond the balancing events. Everything from start to where I'm right now, so one bar is selected, that would be the balancing events. I make sure everything is unlocked, everything is muted, it's locked again, so I cannot do any changes. I fold the tracks again and make sure nothing is selected. Of course, you can do all kinds of different shortcuts and macros for whatever task you want. Assign them to a button on your nanoPAD or whatever MIDI controller. I have a nice way of controlling your own shortcuts or macros. The workflow I use with the nanoSERIES controllers of course works with any MIDI controller, and it is the same even for touchscreen solutions. For these, you'll generally need to connect to a special MIDI driver that connects your touchscreen device via Wi-Fi or USB, but the rest of the process is the same. I prefer hardware controllers for their ease of use, quick setup, and because I can easily replace them with no downtime should something go wrong. I hope you found this glimpse into my workflow useful. Make sure to hit that like button if you did. Let me know your thoughts and feedback in the comments, and of course I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Make sure to stop by orchestraltemplates.com for more templatey goodness. Take care and see you soon.